Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jata Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakamvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Good morning, everybody. So wonderful to be back with everyone. And I'll just start speaking, but I think in speaking, I'll also summarize some of the things that we've been speaking about in the first few days. I was thinking today about a quote I once heard from Albert Einstein. And he said, and interesting hearing this coming from someone who's so respected for their intelligence and research and their scientific acumen. But this is an interesting statement. He said, imagination, does anyone know this one? You know, Andrea? Imagination is?
I don't know the exact quote, but I know.
Yeah, you've heard of it, yeah. He said, imagination is more important than knowledge, which you don't expect to hear from a scientist necessarily. You may think that they put a lot more weight in knowledge, and imagination is just some kind of, less solid, topic. But I believe I understood what he meant by it. And that is that imagination gives you the potential to expand your knowledge, right? Without imagination, your knowledge gets shut down very quick. There's only so much knowledge we have. If you have no imagination, you can't expand it. The great sages, they said that the human life, we may pass through so many different forms of life, but that the human life is meant for tattva jignasa, is meant for inquiring into the truth, right? We have this special capacity as a human being. Welcome, everyone. We have this special capacity as a human. Nobody's sitting in the middle. That's fine. Wherever you're comfortable is fine. Yeah. Fill it on in, because now nobody's going to sit there. You like to hang out in the back? All right. But this human life, we got this potential to, in so many forms of life, we have the ability to satisfy the senses, to search for sense gratification. We eat, we sleep, we mate, we defend. But the human life, we have the special capacity to inquire into the truth. What is it all about? But it's a mystery, right? It's not something that is necessarily so obvious. One has to inquire with some diligence, with some determination, and one has to have imagination. One needs to be able to expand their mind beyond the evidence that's right here in front of our eyes. For instance, Take like the field of like criminal investigation, like detectives, right? Most of us just know about this stuff from like television and the movies, right? But you know, if you have a murder scene, it's a mystery, and there's a certain amount of evidence there, right? Tangible, physical evidence. You know, there's a body, and there's a wound in the body. Maybe there's a weapon there, and maybe not a lot more than that. How do we figure out who committed the crime? It's a mystery. And one detective who's not so expert may say, you know what, we have a cold case here, right? There's only so much evidence, and there's not enough evidence to come to a conclusion. We just ran out, and we'll never find out who committed this crime. But another detective that's got that knows how to engage their imagination can begin to think, who would have done this? Why would they have done this? It doesn't seem like there's an obvious answer, but if we can expand our imagination, right, even beyond, you know, sometimes the real murder mysteries are they're not obvious at all. You have to be able to really expand who might have done this and why. And of course, like in mystery novels and so on, you know, they'll make it that least suspected person. You're like, it was them, right? I can't believe it was them. But in order to figure out that it was them, you would have to imagine that it was even possible for them to do this, right? I wouldn't have thought it was possible for that person to do it. I couldn't imagine that they would do it. Well, you're going to have to imagine that they may have done it if you're going to be able to discover the truth. Now, we talked about some things here yesterday, the day before, that for a lot of people would involve expanding the imagination, expanding what's possible, right? We said that we're not the body, right? That the body is just like a machine. And that within the body, there's a little spark, almost like any machine may run on a battery. There's a spark that animates that battery, or that animates that body. And we call that, in Sanskrit, we call that battery the Atma. But that this Atma is not merely a battery, because it's also conscious, right? It's energizing the body. It's giving life to the body. But it's also perceiving through the body. It's experiencing through the body. It's experiencing sight. It's experiencing sound and smell and taste. And it's experiencing tactile sensations. And it's bringing in all that information. And it's processing that information in the mind. And we may also identify with the mind. Right? A very, very typical thing to do, right? Our thoughts. We all have a mind that's full of thoughts. It's within that mind, there's a sense of identity, who I am, right? And that identity is often tied to our passions in life, our interests in life. You know, if you meet a musician, you say, who? Actually, if you just stop someone on the street and you say, who are you? What's the first thing that they usually say? Their name, right? They give the name, but you say, okay, well, your name is like, that's just kind of like a label, you know, on you, but who are you?
That's the question. The whole point of Ramanam Rishi.
Yeah.
Who am I?
Who am I? That's the first fundamental question in life, right? Who are you? Here's my name. No, but who are you? Right? Maybe then you get their nationality, you know. You might get their occupation. This is what I do for a living. Okay, that's what you do for a living, but who are you? Right? Then maybe you get down to their passions in life, their interests. Oh, I'm into music. You know, maybe their political beliefs or some sort of passions that they have in life that they identify with. But the yogis are saying that even these passions in life that we have, these interests in life that we have, these temporary states of identity that we have, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm American, I'm Indian, I'm black, I'm white, that these are things that come and go, that these are things that have a beginning and an end, and we are what stays the same. We are the ones that observe them, right? Imagine if this is true. Let's just expand our imagination for a bit, right? Imagine if it's true that when the body dies, that we carry on. Now there's testimony, right? Testimony is something that the detectives use, right? Testimony. Right? It's different than physical evidence. There's testimony. People talk about it. People share their thoughts or what they've seen or what they've experienced. And there's these ancient texts, Mahabharata, Ramayana, the Puranas, they're testimonies. People speaking about what they've seen, what they've experienced themselves. Right? And here there's testimony saying that we live more than one life, right? That we pass through many bodies, right? That we have to expand the imagination. For a lot of people, that it can't expand that far. Even they may be very intelligent, even though they may have a lot of knowledge, right? Knowledge of physical things. They may not be able to expand their imagination to allow their knowledge to expand along with it. Right? You have to expand that imagination, and that gives room for the knowledge to expand. If you say that's not possible, I can't imagine that that's possible, your knowledge is going to stop right there. You have to be able to expand it further. So we spoke about something. We said that we're not the body, we're not even the mind. We are this spark of spiritual energy. It's a different type of energy. It's not temporary. It's not under the influence of the force of time, which changes and eventually destroys everything, that the self carries on. Right? Now that's for a lot of people, that's going to be a big pill to swallow. That's enough right there to chew on for a while. But then the yogis are going to say more things, and it's going to require us to expand our imagination a little bit further. Here's the thing. A real scientist, what's crucial, essential for the practice of science, is that one needs to be truly objective, right? One has to not let their attachments influence their thinking. You understand? Just same thing, like we could go to a criminal trial. If the jury, if members of the jury, if the lawyer thinks they're biased, right? They're prone to think a certain way. I remember once I was on jury duty. I was being called for jury duty. Yeah. You go this other. Maharaj, welcome. So good to have you here. I was called for jury duty in New York City, and it was a murder case. Actually, it was an attempted murder case. And I was in a pool of potential jurors. And then so maybe we had like about 20 people there, and we need to narrow it down to like 9 or something. And so then the lawyers start to ask you questions to see if you're biased in any way. And one of them said, have any of you ever had any trouble with the police? Have any of you ever felt abused or mistreated by the police? I said, well, I have. And I told the whole story, how I was once, attacked by a police officer and actually accused of attacking the police officer. Right? That was done to me before. I had to go through a whole trial. Anyway, I won't go into all the details, but I told this, I raised my hand. I said, yeah, I feel I've been mistreated by the police. So then they called me over, and the judge was there, and the 2 lawyers were there, and they were trying to, I said, look, I was mistreated by the police, but it's not going to affect my judgment here. I can be non-biased about this. And the lawyer, for the prosecutor, said, no, you're out of here. So I was off, which was fine with me, but I was just trying to tell the truth. But this is the point. If we're biased, if we're not objective, we'll have trouble discovering the truth. Okay? Can we expand our imagination, or do our biases or our attachments become truth filters that don't allow us to expand our thinking, to understand truths that are beyond what our senses can perceive, truths that we may have to depend on testimony from others who've experienced that truth? Right? Can we expand it? So we said we're not this body, we're not even this mind. We're the spark of spiritual energy that travels from one body to another. Okay, I haven't seen it with my eyes. I'm going to have to expand my imagination if I can say, but it makes a lot of sense. And there's no true objective reason why this is impossible, right? Nobody can bring forward any evidence to disprove this. So at least it's still within the realm of possibilities. Non-biased, intelligent people should accept that this is a serious possibility that we should contend with. But then the yogis are going to say, no, we've got to push it a little further if we want to understand the truth. There's more, and this is going to require us to expand our imagination even more. They're saying that not only does that soul travel through human bodies, but it can travel into other species, right? That you may not have only been like a man, or like, let's say you're a man now, you were a woman in your previous life. Or you're a woman, you were a man in your previous life. Well, that's going to have to expand my imagination. But what if we said you were an aardvark in your previous life? What if we said you were a chimpanzee in your previous life? What if we said that you were, I saw a film of Maharaj speaking to a little mole the other day. Yeah, you're treating it just like any other soul, right? Communicate. What if we were a mole or an insect? A lot of people are just going to say, no. I was never an insect. Can't be. They won't give you a good reason why, but their imagination stops right there. Right? The yogi is going to say not only that, but we also may have been a plant in a previous life. And not only that, we may be in a future life. Right? Yeah. You know, the yogis, this in these sages, they would observe things. And this is what they observed. They said, we can see the presence of the Atma. We can actually see it. Right? There's certain things that we can perceive with our eyes. And then through conjecture, we can begin to understand, apply it, and make sense of it. Right? We may not see, we may be standing inside a building looking through the window, and we see leaves blowing, blowing around. Now, we don't see the wind, right? You can't see the wind. If there are no leaves there, we might not know that the wind's blowing at all, but we see the leaves moving, and therefore we know there's wind there. Right? And the yogis say we can see the presence of the Atma. We can't actually see the Atma. Bhagavad Gita is going to say it's avyaktam, it's invisible. You can't see it with your eyes. Right? But you can perceive it. You can see that. How? They say there's 6 symptoms. When you see these 6 symptoms, then you know the Atma's presence. Birth, growth, reproduction, maintenance, growing old, you can say dwindling or becoming diseased, and ultimately death. Right? Where we see these, it means the Atma is present. It's the Atma, it's the soul, it's the spark of spiritual energy that moves matter in those patterns. And when you see those patterns, you know the Atma is there. Birth, growth, maintenance, reproduction, dwindling, and disease, or finally death. Where do we see this? We see it in human beings. Right? We see human beings are born, and they grow, and they reproduce, etc. We see it in the animals. We also see it in the plants. Right? The plants are born, and they grow, and they reproduce, all of that. Right? The yogis are saying where you see that, that means the Atma is there, soul is there. Okay, that's an interesting idea, but I have been one of those. Okay, maybe I can accept that there's a human soul, and there's a dog soul, and there's a cat soul, and there's even a tree soul, right? But I don't think I could have been one of those. Why not? Well, I have this ability to think and to feel and experience, like as a human, So isn't that different? And the yogis are going to say, well, think about this carefully. Think about this carefully. They're going to say that the soul in a human being is of the same quality as the soul in a tree, of the same quality of a soul in a blade of grass, of the same quality as a soul in a dog or a cat or a dolphin. They're all of the same quality. Well, how so? If that's true, then why can't we communicate with all of these different creatures like we do with humans? Well, we can't communicate with a lot of them, right? Any dog owners here? Okay, yeah, your family has a dog. So your dog, like you look into the eyes of that dog, there's a person in there. Isn't it obvious? Nothing could be more obvious, right? I've heard from people that own dogs that like when they take out their suitcase and they begin to pack to go on a trip, like the dog knows, they're going away for a long time, and they become very anxious, and they can express their emotions through their whimpering and so on. Yeah. Have you been through that before?
Yeah, my dog usually hides.
Okay. Hides. And I once saw a video of it was like someone had a camera inside or several cameras inside their own apartment. And they showed like when they leave on a trip and how the dog is even after they go out the door, the dog just sits there by the door, just waiting for them to come back. And then eventually after some time, it just kind of like walks over to the bedroom and lies down on the bed, maybe because they can smell the person there. And then at the end of the workday, when they come back to the door, the dog just starts running to the door. It's so excited and jumping up and down and spinning around in circles, because that dog has a feeling. inside it. It has emotions inside it, just like human beings do. It can express them. Maybe it can't express them as clearly as a human being does, but with a dog, you can pick up a lot. But what about a cockroach? You don't see a cockroach. It doesn't seem like they're expressing their emotions, you know? What to speak of a tree, right? But the yogis are saying, that doesn't mean, just because of that, that doesn't mean that the soul within the tree or the soul within the cockroach is of a different quality than the soul within the human being. They're going to say it's the body that either expands or contracts that soul's ability to experience and that soul's ability to express itself. It's the body, right? Some bodies lend themselves well to sensitivity and to communication, and some bodies less so, and some bodies still less so, and some bodies hardly at all, right? Bhagavad Gita will talk about this, right? It uses different analogies. It says, like, what is it? Like the mirror is covered by dust, like fire is covered by smoke, or like a child is covered by the womb, on different levels. You know, like I think smoke covering fire, it covers it, but you can kind of still see the fire there. Dust covering a mirror still more so, but you can still see the mirror, right? And in a child in the womb, you can't even see the child in there. Right? So in different bodies, we're covered by the material energy on different levels, and that affects our ability to perceive, our ability to experience, our ability to communicate with others. Yes,
That
Andrea.
expands to inanimate objects.
Inanimate objects, objects that have no soul, and then there's no consciousness. And now, you see, it's interesting because the yogis will tell us that in one sense, there's consciousness everywhere.
The Buddhist.
Yeah. But, well, the Bhagavad Gita's way of explaining this is because there's the Atma and then there's the Paramatma, right? So we call something a living being when it has an Atma there. But the Paramatma is everywhere. So even in a rock, even in a plastic chair, you know, even in concrete, consciousness penetrates it. That's the consciousness of God. So just as our consciousness penetrates our entire body, so the consciousness of Vishnu, they say, penetrates the entire universe. So that's there. But still we draw that distinction. We'll call it inanimate because there's no one else in there feeling what it's like to be a rock. So the yogis, they'll explain it like this. They'll use different analogies. They use those analogies. We could use more modern analogies. Say you wanted to know how fast I was. How fast is Kaustubha, right? And say that on the day that you asked me that, my friend had just lent me their new Porsche, right? Am I pronouncing that right? Europeans, is that okay? Porsche? Sometimes in America they just say Porsche. I didn't think that's Porsche. Yeah. So from my understanding is that car, you can drive it over 200 miles an hour, just smooth. So you say, how fast you can Kaustubha? And I just step into that Porsche. Wow, Kaustubha is very fast. Okay? And then the next day you say, hey, can I see how fast you are again? I say, okay, but I don't have that car. Now I just have some really old, rusted kind of junker car. Or let's say I even have just a bicycle, right? So I get on my bicycle and I ride as fast as I can and I zip by you and you're not so impressed this time, right? I thought Kaustubha was fast. It's the same me. It's just a vehicle that I'm using that is either expanding my ability to travel fast or contracting that ability. Right? It's just a vehicle. So the yogis are saying these bodies are just different vehicles. The soul is the passenger in the vehicle, right? And when the soul is in a human form, its ability to think, to consider, right, to rationalize, right, to ponder, as well as to feel and to communicate, right? It's an expanded ability to do that. And therefore the yogis say, when you reach this human form, this is the time for tattva jignasa. This is the time to inquire into truth, because you've got the body that can do it. You've got the intellect that can do it. If you lose this opportunity, this rare opportunity, and rather than recognizing the special opportunity that you have, you engage just like you were in a lower form. You don't use it. You don't take advantage of all that it's offering. Then in your next life, you can have one of those forms where you don't have all that capability. Right? You can take birth as an animal. You can even take birth as a plant. Then once you're in those forms, it becomes limited, more limited, more limited, still more limited, right? What you can perceive, what you can feel, what you can communicate. But they say, but don't think that that soul is any different. Right? This ability, the yogi cultivates this ability to be able to see the soul as the same in all the different species, in all the different forms. Right? They call this samadarshana. What's the verse again? Bhagavad Gita. Thank you. Vidyavanaya sampane, brahmane gavi hashtani, shuni chaiva svapakecha, pandita samadarshana. The pundits, those that are learned, they can see that in the body of a human being, they say a learned and gentle brahmana, like a very refined human being, right? Very refined in their knowledge, refined in their behavior. They can see the soul in that person. And they can also see the soul in an elephant, and in a cow, and in a dog. And then they say, and even in the outcast, like the dog eater, they use this term, the dog eater, meaning someone who's not so refined in their behavior, not so sensitive, right? And they're not so knowledgeable. They see inequality. They can recognize on the external level the differences, no problem. But they can also see, the pundit, the learned person could see there's an equality here on the spiritual level. And I need to respect that, right? I need to recognize that and respect that. When someone sees that way deeply, that person's very special. Right? Have you ever met someone that maybe in the first time in your life you didn't feel judged by them, you didn't feel like you're put in a little box by them, you didn't feel like they said, okay, this person is a man or a woman, this person is, short, tall, not so intelligent, kind of strong, very attractive, not so attractive. You feel most people, they look at us and even not to blame, it's kind of natural that someone puts us right in a little box, but some people make you feel like you're not in a box, right? And that's a very special, that's a pundit, that's someone that's seeing more, they're understanding more about life, right? We can all become one of those, but we have to cultivate, you have to try to see it. You have to look deeper. We use this example sometimes, you've heard of this art, it's called, what's it called again? It's the kind, those kind of arts that it looks just like some pattern, like some complicated pattern, but you have to stare into it, and then eventually the stereogram. You have to look into it. You have to keep looking, and sometimes you don't see, but you keep looking, and then it comes out. Have you seen those before? And when it comes out, it's like, oh, right? And then once you see it, you're like, oh, it's so obvious. It's right there. It's standing out. But you have to take time looking at it. The yogis do this. They hear from texts like the Gita. They take this testimony, and they say, there's no reason why it can't be true. I haven't been given any valid reason why this cannot be true, and there's a clear logic to it. Let me apply it. Let me go into life. And as I pass through different life and different circumstances and come into contact with different people, let me reflect on what I've heard and see how it applies. And as I keep reflecting like that, it's a way of looking in until it starts to become clear. It starts to become obvious. I see it. I see that there's a soul in every human being. I see that soul, when that soul leaves, that the body is just a bag of chemicals, right? And I can see when I look into the eyes of my dog, I also see a person in there that feels in the same way, right? And when I even touch that tree, I know that there's a living soul in here. I can see it now. I can see it. Call that samadarshana, right? The ability to see this equality and to treat people equally like that too, right? To in some sense understand you and I are brothers, right? Brothers, sisters like this. We're all part of the same family. We're all made of the same stuff. This is a real yogi. Right? This is the awareness that the yogi. You start to see the world like that, and deeper truths start to open up to you. Right? We'll be able to understand more and more and more. And if we're not willing to take up that experiment, if we're not willing to expand our imagination a bit more, like Einstein was saying, imagination is more important than knowledge. You expand your imagination, then you expand how knowledge can fill it in. Right? Then we'll never know. We'll never know. We'll miss this opportunity, yogis are saying. So worth investigating, right? We were talking about this a little bit yesterday. Why didn't we learn this in school? At least, why weren't we taught about this? not necessarily like saying this is a fact, but saying here's how, practically, a billion people in the world or more, this is how they understood life, right? It's an ancient tradition that stood the test of time, right? If we went up into these mountains 10,000 years ago, right, you would find yogis there that would tell us all these same things, right? That the body is a machine made out of material energy, that there's another type of energy called spiritual energy, Purusha, right? Apara or Pada Prakriti, a superior material, a superior type of energy. That's the soul. It's conscious and it's eternal, right? It's irreducible. The consciousness in our bodies is not produced mechanically. It comes from conscious energy that's always conscious and always will. 10,000 years ago, you'd find yogis saying that. Right? We could walk right up to these mountains. Even on the bank of this river right here, we'd find people saying that. And if we come back 10,000 years later, we're still going to find people that say the exact same thing. Right? And the empiricists, they'll have one theory after another, after another, after another, after another. Right? They change so fast. This knowledge has stood the test of time. Right? And even though some scientists are saying we will create consciousness in the laboratory, they can't do it. They can't do it. They can't do it. So isn't it worth at least investigating? Right? So we defined the word yoga right here on the board now. Can you all see it? Yoga is a practice which empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing their own true nature. And we've talked a bit now about the nature of the self, that we are Sat Chit Ananda, that we're eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. This is the promise of these yogis. This is the testimony of these yogis. They're saying, I've experienced it. Lots of us have experienced it. You can experience it. But the way that you're going to experience it is you're going to have to get control of your mind. Right? We think that we are free. And the yogis are saying, actually, no. You're all slaves. I remember. I'll explain. I remember when I was a kid. I grew up in a little town, but just on the edge of New York City. And by the time I was 15 years old, like you reach 15, it's kind of like now I make my own decisions in life. Right? You hit that point where, like, up until that point, you're just told, go here, do this, do that. And then you get about 15. And you start to think, now I make my own decisions. Now I start to investigate this world on my own. And so that's what I was doing. And especially what was driving me was music at the time. I was into this crazy underground type of music. And there was one neighborhood in New York City where like that music was, people knew of it. Otherwise, practically hardly anybody even knew about this music. It was this crazy punk rock music. And I just started to investigate it. I'd jump on the train and I'd go down there. And when I would step off that train and I'd step onto the sidewalks of New York City, you know what I felt? Like really profoundly, like deep. I felt freedom, right? I'm free, right? It was like, you could almost cut it with a knife. It was so thick, like I'm free. I do what I want now. And there's the music and there was drugs and there was girls and there was just all kinds of action, all kinds of people to meet, all kinds of things to do. I was like, I'm free. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. But then later, when I began to study Bhagavad Gita and I began to learn from sadhus about life, I began to see, actually, I was just, you ever see like when they have a bull and they put a ring in its nose? And even a child can just pull that bull where they want it to go. I had a ring in my nose. And I was just being pulled in that direction, from the music that I was into and certain influences, whether it's coming from television or movies or different. I had an idea of what happiness was, of what excitement was. I just had this idea programmed into my mind, and I was following that. I was being pulled in that direction, even though I thought I'm free. Actually, I was being completely controlled. So this is essential. We've talked a bit about the nature of the self, and that's a promise that the yogis are making, that you can experience that. They're saying you can experience it when you learn to overcome the obstacle of the mind. You'll experience it. So now we're going to need to, today we'll begin And tomorrow and the following days, we're going to go deeper into the mind. We really need to understand the mind. Right? The yogis use different analogies for the mind, but something that fascinates me is that within just about the past 50 years or so, maybe, I don't know, when did computer technology really get going? I suppose it was something around the 50s, maybe a little bit before that, but in the 50s it really started developing more in the 60s. You know, the military and so on were into it, and by the 90s, people had their own computers in their homes, and now it's just like now we carry it around in our pocket. But in any case, it's a relatively new technology, very new technology. But computer technology gives us incredibly strong analogies that relate to the teachings that we find in these ancient texts. They're so strong that it lends credibility to these texts. That the way a computer is designed and the way a computer functions is so much like how the mind works, right? And the senses are so much like the plug-in devices that we have on a computer. And the memory is so much like a hard drive. Even we call it the memory, right? So we're going to begin to talk about the mind. Let's get into it. Are you ready? It's such a subtle thing, such an important thing. We live in that mind. We think it's us. Again, the different passions that we have, the different ideas that we have, we think that's me. Any one of us can elevate our state of consciousness in an instant. You want to know how to do it? Interested in doing that? It's a really simple thing. All you have to do is watch your thoughts. Rather than just exist being carried by your thoughts like most of us do as we pass through the day, step back for a second, take a deep breath, and look at your thoughts from a distance as an observer. And when you do that, when you look at your thoughts as an observer, you've already elevated your consciousness because you've realized I'm not my mind. Right? I'd imagine everybody here to some degree has practiced meditation before in their life. And, generally if you go to like a beginner's meditation class, the first thing they do is, you sit still, right? Get your back straight, take a deep breath, close your eyes, right? Then they're going to say, now bring your mind to your breath, right? Bring your mind to your breath. Sometimes they'll say to where your breath is entering your nose. Bring your full awareness right to that spot. Then bring it to your breath in your chest. Feel your chest expand and contract, etc. Bring your awareness entirely there. These are just techniques to kind of settle the mind, to allow us to kind of like drop all of the background thinking that we're normally caught up in, so that the mind can become a bit concentrated. And then they'll tell you, what do they tell you next? Watch your thoughts. Don't try to change your thoughts. Watch them come and watch them go. Have you had that? Someone tell you to do that in a meditation class before? Watch them come and watch them go. The value to that experience is you can very profoundly realize that I'm not my mind. That my mind is moving in all kind of patterns, and I'm observing my mind. Right? But most of the time I'm moving as if I was my mind and I'm identifying with that mind. Remember, it was the sage Vidura down in Haridwar on the bank of this river asked the sage Maitreya, how do we lose touch with our nature? And Maitreya said, you don't lose touch. It's there all along. But we identify the self as being the mind. We identify the mind as being the self. Just as if you see the reflection of the moon on a river and you think the reflection is the moon, well then the reflection takes on the characteristics of the river. It seems like the moon is rippling. Right? We think I'm rippling. We think I'm changing. We think I'm happy and I'm sad. Right? I'm depressed. I'm bored. I'm elated. It's just patterns in our mind. Underneath, we're blissful all along. Right? So we need to overcome that obstacle of the mind. And if we understand the mind as a computer, it really gives us a huge clue into how all this works. Are you ready to go into it? Yes?
Yes.
For real?
Yes.
All right. Let's say that you were trapped in a closet and it was dark in there and you couldn't get out. I don't know who did this to you. And all you had in that closet was a computer and a Wi-Fi connection. All right? The yogis are saying essentially that's what our circumstance is. We're trapped in a dark closet of the body, but we've got this computer of the mind. And with that mind, we can connect with people outside the closet, right? Like if you were in that closet, you'd have that Wi-Fi connection. So you could communicate with people outside of the closet. You could send messages like through email. You could send text messages. You could build a website and communicate through the website. And through all the different, applications that we have nowadays, you could send information out to the world. You could also take information in through all those same channels, right? What to speak of if you were connected to a camera outside, if you were connected to a microphone outside, etc. You could take in all kinds of information, you could take in all kinds of data, and then you could process that information and store that information. That's what the mind does, right? Just like a computer does. That's what the mind does. It gives us the ability to communicate, send information out, take information in, process the information, categorize the information, store the information, pull the information back up. That's what the mind does. And very soon, maybe, I don't know if I'll get into it today, but maybe tomorrow we're going to come to what I call the red pill, blue pill moment of this course. Okay? Are you ready for that? You're right, okay. The moment where we have to decide, will we remain in the matrix? Will we just kind of live like every other conditioned living being lives, or will we make that bold move, right, to really understand the truth and really understand my circumstances? But the yogis are saying that our mind is like a computer. Let's say I had a computer here right now. Let's say like a laptop computer. And then we plugged into that computer a camera, right? What would that camera, if the computer is like the mind, what is the camera? The eyes, right? Then we plugged in a microphone. What would that microphone be? They say, everybody always says voice first, but think about it. What would the microphone be? Huh? The hearing, the ears, right? Because it takes sound in. On a computer, a microphone takes audio data and sends it to the computer. So our ears take audio data and they send it to the computer of the mind, right? And I suppose we could say a touchpad is like the skin, the tactile sense. And although these things aren't on the market, I've heard that they have been developed and are being developed further in computer laboratories as we speak. The virtual tongue, right? The virtual nose. Why can't we invent in other words, there's certain chemicals in food that give it its taste. So why can't we create something that can sense those chemicals, determine what the taste is, and send that information to the computer, right? So our senses are essentially plug-in devices into the computer of the mind, right? But then on the other end, there's a hard drive, on a computer, right? And we call that our memory, right? Where information is stored. We could call that the yogis. It's a little tricky because the yogic texts, sometimes they use the same term for different things. You read one book and it says chitta, means this subconscious mind where all of our impressions are stored. And then other books will say chitta refers to like the entire mind and all its functioning. But we can use an English term then. We could just call it the subconscious mind, right? There are thoughts, there's information that we have stored in our mind that we're not engaging with at the moment. So it's subconscious. It's there. It can be pulled up in the future. It's stored in the mind, but we're not engaging with it in the moment. So a computer has a hard drive that serves like as a subconscious mind. And then there's also the thoughts that we're engaging with at the moment, right? And on a computer, what do we call that? Like the information that you're dealing with in the moment. RAM, right? Or random access memory. I believe there's other terms for it too, right? The information that you're engaging with right now. If you have like a lot of random access memory, I don't know what that would be nowadays, like 64 gigabytes or 120. Anyone know? Anyone good? 24. It's pretty solid. Okay. If you have less than that, then you try to open up a few things at once and it can't handle it. If you have more than that, then you can engage with a lot of information at once. But we all have our own random access memory, the thoughts that we're engaged with at the moment. And we also have applications on that computer that work on the random access memory. In other words, when we're thinking about something, we process it through certain applications. And the yogis call those applications, one they call the manas, which I call the impulsive mind. One they call the ahankara, which we could call the ego or the false ego. And one they call the buddhi, or the intellect. These three different applications in the computer of our mind process information in different ways, right? And we all use them. And the yogis were very, very aware of them. They have a very clear idea. It becomes a very subtle study of how the mind works. And, it gets so subtle and the books get so philosophical and dense, sometimes they disagree with it. Patanjali feels it's like this, and another sage is explaining a little bit differently. And that's okay. But in general, they agree. And we can explain these things, and we'll explain these in the coming days. But let's just talk about one right now, right? And that's called the manas. Right? Sometimes we just call this the mind. I like to use the term the impulsive mind, because this is part of the mind. The way that it operates, the way that it thinks, is it doesn't do any reasoning. It doesn't reach back into the memory and pull up information to compare things. It just reacts as it's programmed. Instant. Like, in other words, I could turn around right now, and I see that there's a poster up there that says, phone-free zone, enjoy the moment. And so I turn around, and the light bounces off of that object, and it enters in through the lens, the camera of my eyes, and that information is transferred to the mind. And in the first application that's going to process that knowledge is called the manas, the impulsive mind. And it's going to have a reaction to it, an instant reaction, a spontaneous reaction. And that reaction, the yogis will say, it falls into one of two categories. Either I like it or I don't like it. Right? I might look over there and say, oh, why did someone have to put that ugly thing up there? Right? Or I might look up and say, what a thoughtful thing to put there. Yes, we need more signs like this. This is good. It's going to be one or the other. I like it or I don't like it. The manas, but here's the point, and this is so crucial. Because I was saying, I would walk out onto the streets of New York City as a 15-year-old and I feel like, I'm free. Right? But was I free? Or was that just programming in my mind? Was I being programmed to respond that way to it? And it had nothing to do with me and my own freedom, the self underneath it all. Right? So the idea with the manas is that our mind has been programmed to respond in a particular way. Let's say that we had this computer here, and we had a camera plugged into it. That's the sense of sight. And we also plugged in a speaker, right? And that would be the vocal. The yogis actually say we don't have only 5 senses. They say we have 11. If we read the senses that we call senses, they call gyanendriyas, the knowledge acquiring senses. But they say that we have 5 more senses that are the senses of action, right? One is the voice. One is like the hands, or the ability to manipulate things. Another is like, you could say, the legs, or the locomotive sense. So that's 1, 2, 3. Then there's the organs of generation, the organs of evacuation. 5 senses right there. So there's 5 senses of action. And then they say the mind itself is the 11th sense because it's the center of them all. So the voice is a sense, right? So we have a camera, we have a voice plugged into the mind, which is the computer. And let's say that we program the computer like this. Let's say that we program the computer so that when we flash a red light in front of the camera, that it triggers something, a response in the computer to play a recording of a human voice saying, I like red, that comes out of the speaker, right? That could be done? Any computer people out there? I don't know how to do it myself, but I know there are people that know how to do this, right? We could program. You flash a red light in front of the camera, the computer says, I like red. And then let's say we go further and we program that computer so that when we flash a blue light in front of the camera, that the computer responds by saying, I don't like blue. Could we do that? Yes? Tell me. Yes. Okay. Now here comes the red pill, blue pill moment of this course. Let me ask you a question. Could we have programmed it the other way? Could we have programmed the computer to say, I don't like red, and I do like blue? Is that possible? Of course it's possible, right? It's just a question of how you program it. Here's another question. This is leading up to the big question. Does the computer like red and not like blue? No. Why not? Huh? Because
Because it is not biased.
it is not biased.
It's probably too small.
Yeah, it certainly is not biased, but why can't it be biased?
There's no opinion.
It has no opinion. Why not?
Because it's inanimate, it's just weird.
Exactly. It's inanimate. We talked about two types of energy earlier, right? We said Purusha and Prakriti, right? So Purusha, the soul, is made of spiritual energy, is one, it's eternal, and two, it's conscious. Whereas material energy has no consciousness, right? So the computer is not feeling anything. It doesn't know what it's like to see red and feel a certain way, but it's mimicking human consciousness by saying, I like red. We've just taken matter, we've taken a machine and it's mimicking. We could have, okay, now here's the big question. In one sense, we've already answered it. Could we have programmed it the other way? We could have programmed the computer to say, I like blue, I don't like red. Here's the red pill, blue pill moment. What the yogis are telling us is that our minds are programmed like this. We've been programmed to think, I need this to be happy, and I need to avoid this to be happy, right? The yogis are saying that's just programming in one application in our mind, right? And when we get a certain image, it enters and it triggers a response. I like that. That makes me happy, right? But the yogis are saying that's just random programming that's been hacked into the computer of your mind, just by your experience in life. But here's the thing, we follow that programming. From the moment that we wake up in the morning to the moment that we lie down to go to sleep at night, we're pursuing happiness based on false programming in the mind. Do you understand? You with me?
Yeah.
We've been told this shape is very attractive, and if you can touch it, you're going to feel so good, right? This place over here is where you'll find happiness. It's got everything suited for you to find happiness. Pursue it. Try to get there, right? And we pursue that, and we pursue that, and we pursue that, not knowing that it's just random programming. It could easily, there's no truth in it, right? There's no truth in it. Now think about that, and think about how we spend our time from the moment that we wake up to the moment that we go to sleep, and are we truly free? Or are we being dragged by the nose, by the programming of the mind as it's connected to the senses? The yogis want us to think about this. Okay, we'll pick up here tomorrow, but we'll go deeper into this, because understanding these three applications of the mind and understanding the hard drive of the mind, once you start to understand this, you really begin to understand yoga. Why chant mantras? Why do asana? Why do these rituals? Why follow all of this social etiquette that the yogis have? What's the point to it all? The point to it all is because it's all connected to the programming in our minds. And we want to come to the point where we're no longer following program that's been hacked into the computer of our mind, but we want to be able to program that mind ourselves very intentionally so that we can go exactly where we want to go. And if we can do that, then we're actually free. Okay, let's stop there. Thank you all so much. I didn't leave time for questions today, but we can take some more questions. Thank you very much. That's all. Thank you.